Welcome back to the lineup here on Radio DePaul, Chicago's College Connection. If you're watching on the video screen, I'm just jamming out to some Go-Go White Sox over here. But again, we take a look here as the Cubs have begun spring training, and they're up 1-0, and Emilio Bonifacio had a leadoff triple, and Valbuena drove him in. First RBI of spring training for the Cubs. Tom, what are your thoughts?
It's a good start. Bonifacio, hitting leadoff for them. Maybe they found a solid leadoff guy. Obviously, they had their issues last year. Couldn't really figure it out. De Jesus ended up being a pretty solid leadoff guy, but maybe Bonifacio can resurrect his career a little here in the friendly confines. We'll
see what happens. And again, Cubs aren't back at Wrigley Field just yet, but Alan Soloman is back in Chicago, and he's on the lineup with us. Again, Alan Soloman, the former Chicago Cubs and White Sox writer of the Chicago Tribune, and now the official writer of A Century of Wrigley Field, the official history of the friendly confines. Alan, how many times are we going to hear "Go Cubs Go" and "Let's Go Go White Sox" this season?
As often as possible. Let's put it that way. Is Jackie Mason actually in the studio, by the way? That's pretty exciting.
I don't think so about that. But again, it's an interesting question, to ask, just because the Cubs, of course, coming off a very tough season, and the White Sox coming off an extremely tough season as well. Just extremely tough seasons on both sides. Ventura coming back with the Sox, and Dale Swain not coming back with the Cubs. So what are your thoughts on both sides of town?
Thoughts on the Cubs is they're right on schedule, which is that they'll probably lose about 85, 86 games again this year. They lost 90-something last year. But they have a plan, and I kind of believe in that plan, even though everything tells me that I should be more cynical about it. But they have some guys that really are a year or two away from being really good baseball players, and this is different from the teams that they've had before, where they've had guys who you kind of looked at as prospects, but there was always something wrong there. They were too small. They had real defensive problems. They've got some kids. Javier Baez, if you walk by the ballpark practice field and you hear a really strange noise off a bat, that's Javier Baez making contact. He really is something. So you look at him being, he might force his way into the ball club this year. Maybe not opening day, but sometime mid-season. You have guys like that, and Albert Almoro, and Chris Bryant, who everyone just loves. He was their first-round draft pick last year, and convinced everybody that the Cubs made a good choice on that. So you have guys like that. They're still a little thin on pitching. That's a key. But they should be better, and you'll be able to see some of that this year. The White Sox problem was just weird because last year they had an okay ball club roster-wise, and they played horribly. They played some of the worst baseball I've ever seen in Chicago, or even worse places than that.
You're going to make me cry, Alan.
I love the White Sox in a lot of ways. They got people that I like a lot. Robin Ventura, I covered him with the White Sox as a player. He's terrific. And I watched what happened last year, and I'm thinking, is Robin even there? What's going on here? They got a problem with Adam Dunn. Adam Dunn, as long as he's in the lineup, he's basically sucking their offense right out of whatever it could possibly be. But if he could hit like 240 even and continue to hit with some power and drive in some runs, that would be huge. And it's possible.
Yeah, I don't think you'd ever expect to hear a $55 million man has to hit for 240. But no, you're right. It was a tough summer last year for Chicago baseball, and I'm glad to hear that the Cubs are at least on track, because some fans are grumbling, obviously, with the high 90s losses last year.
Right.
But looking at off the field problems, this argument between the Rooftop owners and Ricketts, the Ricketts family, obviously the owners of the Cubs. What's your take on that? Do you favor one side over the other, or what do you think?
A little bit. Well, it's hard to pick one over the other. It's rich people suing rich people. So it's kind of hard to be sympathetic in that situation. In fairness, the Cubs signed a contract with these guys. There's an obligation there that's mutual. On the other hand, the owners right now the Rooftop owners are in a situation they're starting to lose some serious money.
Yep.
Their crowds were down. Their draw was down last year. It's not going to be much better than that this year. So they can't make their expenses, and they can't pay their mortgages and their loans. The Cubs, they'll be down this year in terms of revenue, but they can cut salary. They can find ways to kind of make up for that. And they still get a lot of revenue. The owners are really the Rooftop owners are really in trouble, and the best thing they could do, I think, is find some way to have the Cubs buy them out so they get out of that business without too much damage to their pocketbooks, then move on from there. It's hard to be sympathetic to the rooftop owners. They aren't neighborhood people. They're people that one guy owns 3 of them and owns some bars in the area. So you can't love those guys, and they really aren't getting cheated except for the fact there was a contract. And what has to happen really is the two sides to get down to the reality, which is that the rooftop owners can't go on forever losing money. This money simply isn't there. The Cubs want to increase their revenue situation, so they have an interest in getting rid of those guys or finding some way around their objections to the signage. And it'll happen. Probably happen. I think it's going to happen before the season starts, to tell you the truth.
That's a very good point, Alan. And again, talking about a different side of the Chicago Cubs now, the new manager on the north side of town, Rick Renteria from the San Diego Padres, and he was a part of some winning a little bit. Adrian Gonzalez, they made it to the playoffs a couple of times. Seemed like they always played the St. Louis Cardinals and lost to the St. Louis Cardinals. But now Rick Renteria is trying to win here. And talking about Rick Renteria, Dale Swaim made a late season move that could have gotten him fired. And Tom and I debated about this, I believe in September when it happened, giving Travis Wood just an inning when he needed an inning to break the 200 innings pitched for the first time in his career. So first off, what are your thoughts on that? I thought it was a terrible move by Swaim. I thought he should have given him 6. Tom thought it was an okay move on his part. So what are your thoughts on that? And then what are your thoughts on the new man in town, Renteria?
Well, first of all, on Dale, I think he did an okay job with what he was given overall. And one incident or one little bit of stuff doesn't make his career, or even a 2-year thing with the Cubs. He had some issues with some players, and management upstairs didn't support him, and that created some problems. They bring in Renteria, and they hope that he'll be able to communicate better with people like Starlin Castro, and that's kind of code there for Hispanic players. And if he can kind of get along with Castro and find a way to get him out of the funk he was in much of last year, if he has a comeback year, then Renteria will be worth every penny he's being paid. If he's as uncertain and as inexperienced sounding as he has been so far in spring training, there could be a problem. But by all indications, this is a guy who's a good man, a good baseball man. He simply hasn't been a manager, and we'll see how he handles that.
Well, hopefully for Cub fans, he doesn't end up as uncertain and hesitant as you mentioned. But switching over to the South Side team here, obviously we just talked about the White Sox struggles last year. But looking at their pitching rotation, obviously those front 3 guys, Sale, Quintana, and Danks, are pretty much locked in. But going into spring training, those last 2 slots are up for grabs. Obviously the young guy Eric Johnson is in the front to grab one of them. But who do you see grabbing those last 2 spots for the White Sox?
I think it's a toss-up. It really is. If I'm a young pitcher for the White Sox or a veteran trying to hang on, I'm thinking this is my chance. This is my chance to get into a situation where I'm in the rotation and actually make some money for a couple of years. The top 3 guys are fine as long as they stay healthy. If Dangus comes back, and if they all stay healthy, they'll be terrific. But those other 2 parts and their bullpen is a little bit shaky. That's the unknown here. The White Sox, they're trying to stay competitive. They really have to stay competitive in their market, or they'll just draw nobody to that ballpark. and they are competitive. And picking up Abreu was big, and Eaton might work out in the outfield. So that's why I look at these players and I think, okay, they so underachieved last year, and they played such stupid baseball last year. I mean, Gordon Beckham was playing baseball like I've never seen a smart guy play before. Just this one stupid thing after another. Ramirez was just terrible, even though he had numbers that were okay. If they can get Ramirez back into where he should be and get Beckham up to where he should be for the first time, really, and as I mentioned with Dunn, get him to the point where he's productive and not a hole in the lineup, they could challenge the Tigers and challenge the Indians, who were really improved last year. But it's really a crapshoot. It really is with the White Sox, and I wish them well.
That's a good farewell card to the Chicago White Sox this season. But again, talking about the left fielder, Diane Viciedo, again, you look at, again, you talked about Abreu and Adam Eaton and Matt Davidson, the 3 young studs, or potentially young studs again. We'll see what happens that the White Sox picked up. And Paul Konerko and Adam Dunn, the veterans that the White Sox are hopefully looking at to have solid seasons, and Konerko being off the bench and Dunner being in the DH role. But let's look at Viciedo and Beckham, 2 younger players, but again, players that need to have solid seasons for the White Sox, as you said, to contend with the Tigers. So again, Viciedo batting .265 and 14 home runs, 56 RBIs, and as you mentioned, back with a solid defense, but again, just the batting average, which was solid throughout the first half of the season, but then it just dropped. It was 267, 5 home runs, and 24 RBIs. So for Gordon Beckham, and I guess you could put Alexi Ramirez in that column too, 21 errors or around that number. That's just astonishing for a shortstop. What do you see between those three players, and will they pick it up this upcoming season in 2014?
Eli, all three of them have to figure out that, okay, I'm going to be, what kind of ball player I'm going to be the rest of my career? Am I going to be an all-star or close to being an all-star player, or am I going to be one of those guys that kind of hangs on and has a nice career and retires after 8 or 9 years in the big leagues and goes back to their house and hopefully doesn't spend all their money at one time? And Gordon Beckham should be an all-star at this point, and he hasn't done that, and it's all in his head. Beneath that beautiful head of hair, something strange is happening, and it's not been real positive. Viciedo, kind of the same thing. It's his time now. He should be an all-star or come close to being an all-star. Ramirez is an all-star. He was not an all-star. I mean, he's a good player, but he was lost last year. Now, whether that was a matter of not dealing with some personal issues very well or other things, he just was lost. And if those guys who were lost can be found, which sounds like a hymn right now, if they can come back and figure it out and become the kind of players they should be, 280 with good power and good situational hitting and not striking out in situations and making good decisions in the field, this team could contend. If all three of them, or if two of the three of them, have years like they had last year, then you're going to see some changes in midseason, and it might be Robin's last year, which would be kind of sad.
I completely agree with you on that note, as well as Gordon Beckham's hair, very luscious as well. But again, talking about your book, as I mentioned, A Century of Wrigley Field, the official history of the Friendly Confines. If you want to give the listeners here just a wrap up of what the book is, a history of the book. I understand history is in the title, but just what it is exactly, and I guess what your wife thinks of the book as well, because as you said, she is a writer for the Cubs on MLB.com.
My wife loves it because she loves me. She's just
That's way. A good thing.
The book, at least because we're all day-to-day, as they say in baseball. The book basically is a history of Wrigley Field. It turns 100 this year. This is its centennial year. Major League Baseball did a centennial book for Fenway Park in 2012, its centennial year, and that went so well. They went to the Cubs and said, how about you guys doing it? And the Cubs happily, with the MLB, had me write the narrative for the actual history, and also a whole bunch of shorter stories interviewing players and other people who are involved in the ball club. And as a result, the text, most of which I wrote, is almost as good as the pictures, which are outstanding. If you love this ballpark, you're going to see pictures of the ballpark from its opening day in 1914 through the development of the ballpark, its rebuilding, the building of the bleachers, all that process, plus players that you've seen and loved and players you've heard about and never really saw pictures of. What it is to me is a fabulous picture book, combining archival stuff and new stuff by their own staff people, especially Steve Green, aided by their historian, who does terrific things for the ball club as a whole. And it's just a terrific tribute to the ball club and to the stadium. And to watch the stadium evolve from decade to decade is really kind of exciting. It was fun for me to write. It really was.
You know what, Alan? Tom and I are going to go order a book after this show is over. You just made it sound that good.
Order several, Eli.
We will do so. Again, Alan, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll maybe talk to you in April when Gordon Beckham is batting 300.
I'd love to. Thanks, Eli.
All right, thank you very much. Again, that's Alan Soloman, former writer of the Chicago Tribune, and again, a terrific book he just came out with. Again, that book was called The Century of Wrigley Field.